Hey everybody, welcome back to the Backcountry Manifesto podcast brought to you by the good folks at sharedpoor.com. And speaking of good folks, today on the show we have my good friend, Dr. Aidan Beers. Aidan is a wildlife biologist employed by University of Montana. He has studied everything from, or interacted with everything from the bears to Katmai. And if you're a fan of Fat Bear Week, look at that Kumo here. See, I caught it. If you're a fan of Fat Bear Week, that's where that's filmed, I guess.
Yeah. That's
like the epicenter of Fat Bear Week. If you've seen any of those pictures of like 15 grizzly bears, all on, or brown bears, I guess, all on the waterfall, it was probably taken there. He's also done things like follow around the Yellowstone wolves and inspect their kill sites and just all sorts of really interesting stuff. And today what we're going to talk about is, you and I had talked about this. I want to talk about a lot of your really cool experiences as a wildlife biologist, or even as like a student or intern or what have you. And then I want to tell people what they could do to become a wildlife biologist themselves. We're going to try and keep the cussing to a minimum because like, I feel like this could like really be a great podcast. If you are a kid or the parent of a kid, I feel like this could be a really important, interesting podcast. We're going to try, you want to try and keep this one pretty family friendly?
Sure.
Okay. So we're going to give the people what they want right away. We're going to talk about bears and wolves. What do you think?
Sounds great.
Okay.
I love talking about bears and wolves.
One of the first gigs that you got were the Wolves of Yellowstone.
That's right.
That's wild. Literally, and also in the sense that like, that's hyper competitive. And you got that straight out of undergrad.
Pretty close. Yeah.
What, describe what you did with the wolves in Yellowstone in like a general way. And then I'm going to ask a bunch of follow-up questions.
Yeah. So I got super lucky, and just happened to be through people that I know, that I had contacted some folks at the Wolf Project saying, hey, do you need any help? And they kind of said, well, that's nice, but no. And then they ended up last minute needing someone to jump onto the winter study, the late winter study. They do 2 winter studies every year. And this has been going on since the wolf reintroductions in 1995 and 1996. So I jumped on. I think they let me know. They asked me maybe a week before the second winter study started in 2012.
You're saying winter study is if I know what that implies.
I'll tell you exactly what it means.
We're going to get there? Okay.
I'll tell you exactly what it means.
Okay, go ahead.
The winter study, just short for winter predation study.
Okay.
So that's where they have teams of 3 tracking every pack that they can, where they have GPS or radio collars somewhere in the pack. And these 3 people are tracking the wolves from sunup to sundown every day for a month. And
how many wolves are in Yellowstone? How many packs are in Yellowstone at the time that you're doing this, right? And what percentage of those critters are collared?
So this is a stat that's constantly in flux.
Sure.
I think that the max was over 100 in about 2009, I think. I want to say it was like 110, but maybe it was a little more than that. It's come down. It had, even by 2012, it was lower than that. And it's been pretty stable since then at around 80, I think, 80 to 90.
Okay.
My memory might not be quite right on that, but they try to get at least one caller out in as many packs as they can. And they do that capture during January and February. I wasn't there for that, so I didn't get to be on for capture, unfortunately. But that can be really difficult sometimes, though, because if you don't already have one GPS caller there,
it's hard to decide where the wolves are.
It's hard to find them. Yeah, especially in some of those territories where it's really dense canopy cover. You're not likely to just find
aerial
them.
survey
right.
or whatever.
It's hard to find them. So actually, the idea is that you have your wolves in sight as long as possible every day. You get 1 day off a week. So on that 1 day, there are 2 people working.
Right.
And then...
Oh, so it's a rotation. Somebody's always watching.
So there are always 2 people, at least 2 people working on any given pack.
And about how many, when you were doing it, how many packs were there? And what year were you doing? 2012?
This was in 2012 that I just started on the winter study. In February and March, the month of March of 2012. So this
How many packs were there?
I think that there were people tracking. I think I could probably count them, maybe 4 or 5 packs at that time.
Okay.
There were several more, and there were several more that had transmitters, but they weren't as high priority at the time.
Or they were like way remote or something.
Way harder to get to. Like I remember the Cougar Creek pack was way harder to get to, or like the Beckler packs. That's obviously that's like down in the southwest part of Yellowstone. That's way harder to get to, especially where we were based up in Mammoth Hot Springs. And the roads that are open and kept clear during the winter is just that northern road from Mammoth Hot Springs to Silvergate. And so it's it can be logistically challenging, and especially because when I got there, the pack that we were following had run off, and they were nowhere near their normal territory.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So we had a bunch of days where we couldn't find them.
And were you using like sleds, like snowmobiles?
We didn't use any sleds. We used skis. We used the Park Service trucks. So
you were cross country. Okay, so in the middle of winter in Yellowstone, you were getting as close as you could to these wolves. I assume that you were using like antennas and transmitters to kind of like.
Yeah. So So we had. So we had the these are VHF transmitters. So yeah, we had the little H-shaped antenna. You stand there and you would just hop in the car and turn on the antenna that's attached to the car and just start scanning frequencies for your pack. And just kind of passively until you get to an area driving along the road, still dark, where you think, to getting towards our pack's territory. And then you're really starting to listen. And then you might...
Don't freak out. I'm going to move your microphone closer to you.
Sure.
Go ahead, keep going.
And then there were a couple points where you get to along that road. A high point where we thought this is a good topographic spot because, even though radio waves from their transmitters can travel a long ways, they're line of sight basically, and they bounce around topography, but they don't go through it. So you get to a high point or a plane, even better.
They're probably not going to go over that ridge.
Yeah. So there are ways you can kind of fiddle with the antenna. There are a lot of ways you can fiddle with the antenna to kind of say, well, I think it's in that direction on the other side of the ridge. And then you go up to the top of that ridge, and then you might get a really strong signal, and you can tell where they are. And it's just really like the sharpness of that ping coming through on the radio that tells you. So it's really fun. I have a bunch of memories in the dark driving through a snowstorm or just after one. Maybe the bison on the road, and it's dark and cold, but you just start to hear a little bing, 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 bing on one frequency, and you think, okay.
It reminds me of like radar in a James Bond movie.
I mean, kind of, yeah. It is. It's that set sort of repeating send that it's doing until, unless you would get the faster doot, 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 and that's the mortality signal.
Oh no!
Where if the caller detects that it hasn't moved for 4 hours, for the VHF ones,
that's as long as it is.
Wolves are constantly moving.
Really?
They are constantly moving. I remember there's that Barry Lopez book about wolves, and he says the wolves will live and die by their feet. They'll cover 40 miles a day sometimes if they need to, and they're just constantly moving.
Very recently, and this is going to be up on a later podcast, but I did this. Do you know a guy named Donnie Dust? He was on the show Alone.
Oh, no, I haven't watched that yet.
He's a wonderful dude, a stone tools expert, and he invited me. He's going to be on the podcast at a later date, but he invited me down to cut up some stone tools with him.
Oh, cool.
And, to cut up some bison with stone tools with him. That was crazy. We're going to eat some of that later.
Amazing.
Yeah. And somebody, there was a camera guy, a shooter down there at Grip. Really, really, really awesome dude, Jack Fisher. And we were talking about books, and he was recommending Barry Lopez to me emphatically. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Solid writer. Yeah, he's a great writer.
Yeah, sorry, I just needed to.
So yeah, the idea is to keep these wolves in sight to do behavioral observations for the entire month of March, as much as you can. And it's as minute and detailed as 8:20, wolf 473 stood up, just walked around. Oh, they're howling now. Laid back down.
Really?
Yep. And then you code it later. And this is all going into much bigger picture stuff than I was ever involved with. But it also, I never saw.
What do you mean by that?
There are a number of ongoing research projects that are using these data that have been collected for a long time. For example, they're still writing papers and getting a lot of distance out of data that's been collected over this long period.
Who's they? What do you're using like these?
So the project, the Yellowstone Wolf Project, has a few permanent employees.
Okay.
Working for the National Park Service or the nonprofit foundation that funds some of the work that they do. And they are dedicated scientists who are working on the Wolf Project. And they have some other side projects that they work on too. Like the cougars in Yellowstone have been in focus off and on over the years. So a lot of the kill site investigations that I did as both in winter study and then later during the summer study that same year, those data that we collected are continuing to be part of different kinds of papers, because you can do studies about the condition of the animals or the location or the species, depending on what kind of angle you want to take and what sort of questions are most pressing for different kinds of basic research and management. So
it was a lot like you were on a kind of scouting mission, reporting back to the generals, and then the generals made this big battle plan related to what you had observed. Would that be like kind of accurate?
I think, yeah, that's a fair analogy. I think, yeah, we were out there. I was a grunt, yeah, for sure, on this project. I was by no means anywhere up and making any decisions other than just, this is where I think the wolves might be today. And that was a lot of fun. And really for me, it was an incredibly beneficial project because I did see that the more science and research side of these big projects, and not just the sort of charismatic BBC nature documentary side. And a lot more of the nuance of the landscapes and the species interactions and what the ecology of the system really is. And I think it gave me good insights, but also good connections and good just sort of seeds of thought that have become fruit much later down the road.
Sure.
Unaffiliated with Yellowstone in particular.
What was one of the most amazing things that you saw when you were following? Because, okay, let's talk about like the day-to-day. So we say following these wolf packs, but one of the things specifically that you did was you would be following these wolf packs as they made kills.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, well, but I mean, you were lucky a few times, more than a few times, and you analyzed the kill sites in depth, right? Is that, am I getting that right? We have unlimited film here, so we can make me look like not an idiot if you want.
My pack was struggling when we were
Your pack sucked.
They were on the decline for sure.
Dude, they were fucking dogs.
Within a couple months after I left, that pack no longer existed. I think 2 or 3 of them.
Do you think you jinxed them?
Could have been. 2 of them, the 2 most senior wolves in the pack, both died while I was there. I did their field necropsies too. It was very interesting. It was kind of sad just because, like,
well, sure.
I've just been watching these animals for 30 days or more. I mean, they were killed by other wolves, and that's inside the park. That's the most common cause of mortality.
Really?
Outside the park, it's people, but
sure.
In the park and
people hunting and trapping and or cars.
Mostly hunting and trapping.
Really?
Yeah, it's a big source of mortality.
Sure. Okay, so. What is one of the most, in your opinion, like one of the most amazing things that you've seen while you've been following up these wolves?
Oh man. I mean, there were a lot of really cool things. Like I can remember a number of times where I found the wolves by surprise. There were a couple times during the summer study, which is when we were following about a week behind GPS collared wolves. There were a couple times we ran into wolves without any collars on them, just while we were out in the wilds. Just come up over a hill. The wind,
like really naturally running into them.
Yeah, totally. One time I remember we were up on Specimen Ridge. It's a bit south of the main road in the northern part of Yellowstone. So we're walking southeast along the ridge and come up over the hill. So the wind is at our face, and come up over the ridge, and a wolf is 30 yards ahead. And it spooked right away when it saw us. And we usually do really well at making sure we don't spook a bear or something or come up on something. But it was really open terrain.
You try to avoid any sort of like human influence on these animals in any sort of way.
Yeah, as much as we can, and also just safety wise, especially because in that summer predation study, you're going to kill sites, and the reason that we would go a week behind those kills is to make sure that there wasn't a bear on it still.
How would you determine that it was a kill site?
Well, at the time the protocol was that any GPS points at least 2 consecutive GPS points within 100 meters of each other. So that's at a half an hour collection interval.
Okay.
So they're collecting points every half an hour.
So if there was like a coordinate on a map and there were 2 GPS points representing 2 different wolves.
From one wolf. From one
wolf.
Yeah.
Okay.
So consecutive points in time.
Just knocking right around that same area.
Yep. And it was usually more
there was a reason.
Yeah, because wolves, like we were saying earlier, wolves are constantly moving. So if they're 2
They wouldn't sleep in the same spot for half an hour?
Sometimes it's a nap. Like sometimes it's a nap. And then it's meant to be a pretty exhaustive sort of design where you're getting as many of the kills as you possibly can. So a lot of times we just walk up and just find like a wolf bed, like a flattened area of grass and some tufts of fur. Other times we'd find with maybe the same number of GPS points. It could be flattened area of grass, a couple tufts of wolf fur, and a few shards of bone. And that was especially during when the elk calves or deer fawns were dropping. That's all that would be left.
All that would be left.
It might be like 2 to 4 wolves that kind of stumbled upon an elk calf and ate the whole thing in an hour or 2, down to just little bits of shards of bone left. Because when the elk are really that young, their bones are really soft still.
Sure.
So there were a couple times though where we just stumbled upon the wolves. We weren't looking for them, and they spook right away. Wolves are mostly really skittish about people. They get a little bit more used to being with the ones that are around the cars and the roads all the time.
Right.
They get kind of used to
tolerance.
it. Yeah, they have some tolerance. They're definitely still pretty spooky.
Yeah.
Another time we were just kind of standing there chatting. Kind of, we hadn't been moving for a while, looking at the map, and this black wolf just, again, maybe 30 yards away, just trots along on a little deer trail, just kind of looking over its shoulder at us, checking us as it goes by. But actually, I'm thinking 2 of my favorite things. One of them was where this was in the winter studies still. So it was in March. There's a lot of snow on the ground, but that was a pretty warm March in 2012. And all the south-facing hillsides were bare. So we were at the Hell Roaring Overlook for anyone who's been there, glassing over the Hell Roaring area with spotting scopes and binoculars, trying to find. We knew our pack was in the area. We're trying to find them and watch them for a while. And we found them. And then within the same view plane, in a spotting scope, there's also a grizzly bear walking maybe 10 yards away from some of them. There are 5 wolves in this pack. Yeah, there's a bear walking right with them, just kind of following along. And what I was told, is that when they've just come out of hibernation, bears start following the wolves around whenever they can, because the wolves they're not efficient killers, but they're effective killers. They're way better at chasing something down, like an elk, than the bears are. So the bears will follow around the packs, wait for them to make a kill, and then try to push them off. And I saw that happen with more than one kill, where there would be wolves on the kill, bear comes in for a while, they tussle a little bit, and bears are big and they're fast. Wolves and they want that. Wolves are really quick. So they'll be darting in and harassing the bear, just kind of trying to nip at its butt and like pinch at its ankles. sort of thing, and just harassing it constantly, trying to get it to leave. Sometimes, usually the bear wins for long enough that it gets to feed on it for a while. So in this case, there's this big open hillside, and our wolves are kind of walking along with the bear, and on some unseen cue, they all start running, just booking it kind of across the hillside and down. And the bear, bears can sprint 30 miles an hour, but they can't keep up with wolves over that sort of distance. He's loping along for a while, but he's coming out of hibernation. He's hungry. He's not moving fast. So he slows down and sits down on the ground to rest for a while, and then starts kind of walking along, following him. But the wolves, I don't know if it was one of their kills or a winter kill, or if it was I kind of suspect, because of where it was, that it was a cached cougar kill that they caught wind of and ran after, and they were just tearing into this kill. They pulled out from under a bunch of brush that we could see on the other side of this hill, and they were eating as fast as they could. Eventually, the bear comes in too and is fighting them off, and I don't know how long it was, maybe half an hour of back and forth, and eventually, kind of one by one, over a period of about 5 minutes, the wolves give up and walk away, and then the oldest male in that pack, I'm forgetting which number that it was, but came back over a little hill and just kind of stood there staring down the bear for a while, not even like nipping in and biting it or anything, but just staring at the bear for a while. And the bear nibbled for maybe another minute or two and then just left. I don't know why. It was really cool though. And then the wolves all 5 of them come running back over and dive into that kill again. And I kind of wonder if that was just a sort of communication of just so say, well, we're still here. We'll come back and keep harassing you and make it not worth your effort. Because, I mean, most animals, they're good at what they do. And this is really clear in bears. Bears are kind of in their essence, lazy. Like most animals, but you might also call them efficient. They're trying to get as many calories as they can without expending many calories. And it's risky and annoying and takes a lot of work to fight off wolves that are biting at you and barking and howling and whatnot. So he or she gave up and walked away. And the wolves got to eat that. It was really cool to see. Another favorite thing, I can tell this one pretty quickly. We were walking in the Swan Flat area, just a bit south of Mammoth Hot Springs. That's a really bear dense area, but this one actually doesn't have to do with bears. Now, as I was just saying, animals in general are really good at what they do. Like thinking about animal intelligence is a funny thing, because how do you define that? Like some of them are good at human tasks, but they're bad at other things, or they're bad at human tasks, but they're really good at what they do, obviously. So I don't know what sort of research there is. Really, this is not anywhere near my current research about wolf cognition and planning and strategy or tactic sort of work. And I don't know what sort of research there is there, but what I could anecdotally say this looked like a trap that wolves were setting for an elk, because we walked through a little patch of land. There was a little bit of a hill, maybe 100 yards ahead of us. It was a sagebrush, open sagebrush hill, and a forest on both sides of this kind of rounded hill bulging out towards us. The one wolf came in from the right and trotted down and was coming down to one spot, sat there for a moment, and then saw us down in the flats a ways away, stopped, and went back up the way it came. We were kind of sitting there like, oh, that was cool. There was a wolf right there. And then not 30 seconds later, an elk came ripping around at the same contour, at the same level on that hill, right where that wolf would have been, and another wolf chasing it right behind, right on that elk's heels. And I think there was, if I remember right, there was another one that came out behind that one too. But as soon as the elk passed where that wolf would have been, it stopped. Yeah. And kind of looked around, gave up. I mean, I can describe the sort of, this is anthropomorphizing for sure, but it looked like a sort of,
what's up, dude?
Where? Yeah. What happened? And it looked at us and then turned around and went back the way it came. I think you could also probably say both wolves independently got kind of spooked by us and gave up. It sure looked like something else going on.
It sure looked like you guys kind of stepped in on a plan.
Yeah, that we messed up a trap. It was pretty cool.
That was pretty cool.
Again, that's not a thoroughly researched event in my mind, but it.
No, sure, but anecdotally, man, I asked you what was cool, not like objectively, like.
Yeah.
Okay, we are going to be right back, and we are going to talk about the brown bears of Katmai, Aidan's experiences with those bears, a couple other projects that Aidan worked on, and I guess some advice on being a biologist or becoming a biologist. We're going to be right back. Hey guys, this is Ad Hayden coming to you, or I guess semi-Ad Hayden. We had a whole bunch of ad copy written up, but I don't think I need it for this product. I just want to tell you about something that I like genuinely. That's sharedpour.com. Sharedpour.com is the place to go, in my humble opinion, if you're looking for hard-to-find bourbons, allocated whiskeys. I know that those two are sometimes the same thing, or just spirits in general. I've been using them since way before we even considered being partners with them. Actually, since before, Andrew, I think, when did we start recording episodes for this? Yeah, like since before we recorded the first episode of Backcountry Manifesto. And here, look, here's the receipts to prove it. You see this bottle of Mammoth from our bourbon? That's a single barrel select right there. Now check this out. Here, you can hear it too if you're listening. Right, is that gonna be in frame, Andrew? Okay, well right here, I don't know. There's my receipt from March of 2024. I really do use these people. I believe in like them as a company. They're great folks. Now, if you're 21 or older, that is very important. If you're a minor, pay no attention to this advertisement. And you live in the United States, sharedpour.com will ship liquor straight to your doorstep. You'll need a signature, but they'll do it with flat rate shipping, which is really helpful if you're ordering a couple bottles. That way you don't pay out the nose through shipping. You could order like 10, 15 bottles. I don't know, maybe Craig, don't get mad at me. And they will ship for the same price as one. The other thing is that they're customer service experts. If you call them, should you have a problem with your order, and you won't, you will get a person who actually works there answering the phone and making the issue right. They have the best selection, whether it's a single barrel pick, again, a hard to find allocated bourbon, or even your daily sipper. You should check out sharedpour.com. And right now, and that is ad speak, you can use code BACKCOUNTRY, okay? That's Backcountry, all one word, all caps. I think that's important. That's what they were texting me and telling me was important. You will get 10% off your entire purchase at sharedpour.com. Go check them out. You'll like them as much as I do. You'll get a bunch of cool whiskey. You'll impress your friends. You'll annoy your spouse. And you'll have some great spirits. Backcountry for 10% off your order at sharedpour.com. So you mentioned Swan Flat, and you mentioned the bears. You, as we kind of teased, you spent a lot of time in Katmai. Katmai, famous for bears.
Yep.
If, as I said in the intro, if you've seen like those pictures of like 15 giant bears, just all fishing for salmon under the same waterfall, it's probably an image that was taken from the boardwalk at Katmai.
Good chance of it, yeah.
And then a lot of people, I feel like, know Katmai because of Fat Bear Week.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. What did you do at Katmai?
So in 2017, I worked a season as a bear management technician at Katmai. So my job, as I've sort of boiled it down to its essence, was to yell at bears and yell at people. It was managing the interaction, a little more eloquently, managing the interactions between visitors and bears.
Meaning what?
Meaning that it was my job to make sure that bears didn't get close to people, that humans didn't get close to bears. 50 yards was our buffer, or larger if need be, if the situation called for it. And to make sure people didn't leave their stuff about. One of the rules in Brooks Camp, where I worked, is this remote camp where people fly in for the bear viewing. One of the rules is that you can't leave your stuff anywhere. The only place you can leave any of your personal belongings, and especially food, is at the campground, inside a building, or in a designated food cache that has an electric fence around it.
Really?
It's not a powerful electric fence.
Yeah, I've seen it before. Is it the kind that like you just kind of roll out?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's one of those ones where, bears are curious and very scent driven. So usually they'll investigate it with their nose and they just get a little shock through the nose and it spooks them. So one of the most common things I did was just reminding people that if you're going to set your bag down, don't walk away from it. It has to be within reach at all times because bears are sneaky, despite being huge animals that lumber through the woods. They can be very sneaky and appear out of anywhere.
Why was it so important that the bears didn't get the bags? I mean, like I know, but like,
well, so we really don't. It's really important that when bears and humans are interacting, and this goes for Katmai or anywhere else, that one of the most important things is that bears don't come to associate humans with being a food source.
Developing the association.
Yes, exactly. We don't want bears to think of humans as a way not to either be food, obviously, but also to be somewhere they can go back to get food.
It's hard for people to understand why like feeding wildlife is a bad idea. In general, like I guess there might be some sort of and don't be like, oh, I think this is one of those times. Like, trust me, if it's one of those times, you'll know. Outside of very specific incidences, it is not at all good for people to feed wildlife because it leads to a lot of wildlife and human confrontation and like really, and in the case of like, things like bears and, coyotes, wolves, foxes, whatever, you're talking about a predator, it could be really, really ugly really quick.
Yeah. And there's the phrase, I heard it in Yellowstone first, was a fed bear is a dead bear. And if bears come to associate humans with food, that bear is much more likely to be dangerous to people. And that bear won't be tolerated.
Right.
So for the safety of people around there, usually that bear is removed, usually lethally. So in Katmai, they've done a really good job at managing this. And what's really unique about Katmai and about Brooks Camp is that over the course of the last few decades, people were there first. It wasn't an area that was really heavily used by bears for a long time, because it was an area used by the native peoples who lived there, and they kept the bears away. So there's always been this big salmon run that's the draw for the bears now, but the people who lived there, they kept the salmon for themselves, and they kept the bears away.
Sure.
There was, in 1912, there was the largest eruption in the world of the 20th century in what is now Katmai National Park. It was Mount Katmai. It's erupted. It's a really interesting eruption because it didn't actually blow off the top of the mountain. The center of the mountain emptied out through a hole next to the mountain in the valley next door. So the magma chamber emptied out through a little side vent in the valley rather than out the top of the mountain. Then the top of the mountain collapsed. And there's now a lake in the center of Mount Katmai. But it was a huge eruption and it displaced all the people who lived there for a while. But then it was also declared a national monument.
It's like squeezing a jelly donut.
Yeah. And there's now the Valley of 10,000 Smokes. It's not steaming anymore, but in some places it's filled with ash. In some places 700 feet deep. And it's an amazing landscape. I'll share some pictures if you want.
They're over your shoulder right now.
It's one of the most unique landscapes I've ever seen. It's incredible. I believe that some lunar training for NASA took place in Katmai because of such a weird environment. It's very weird.
And if you're interested in NASA and lunar training, you should check out episode 1 of the Backcountry Manifesto podcast, where we interview astronaut Laurel O'Hara, who had just returned from 6 months at the International Space Station. You like that?
I love it. So yeah, it's just this bizarre landscape. So because of this really interesting landscape and the contribution to our understanding of geology and history, that area was declared a national monument, and the people who had lived there before weren't allowed to go back. In the decades that followed, bears found that salmon run, and they started to occupy it too. But people started coming back with fishing camps too at about the same time. So seasonal fishing lodges were established. And so people started fishing it too, and they're kind of fishing alongside the bears. And now over the last few decades, it's become much more of tourism driven rather than fishing driven for people being there. But Brooks Camp as a destination for people has been around for about as long as it's been somewhere that bears go to go fishing. This is at least what I was taught when I was there in 2017. So the entire time that Brooks Camp has existed, there have been more or less the same physical boundaries and buildings in place, where there's a small lodge and a bunch of cabins. There's a ranger station and some housing for park employees and for the employees of the lodge company that does guiding. And the bears know those boundaries.
Really?
They absolutely know.
Last time I crossed, I got shot with a paintball gun.
Actually, we'll get to that because I never used a paintball gun there.
Do some people?
Not that I know of. It's the philosophy of managing or harassing the bears in Katmai is a sort of lowest level of force possible approach where you
sit them down, you go, hey,
sometimes
I really didn't like that.
Honestly, for some of for some bears, most of these bears that are there they grew up there. They've been there before. They were raised there, and they know the boundaries. They know they're not supposed to be there, and you can see it as they come into camp. Especially, they'll like kind of try to sneak through early morning. And
a little sheepish.
You can see they look a little on edge just in their body language. They don't look the same sort of confidence you might see elsewhere. They're a little on edge and come around the corner, especially if you're wearing a ranger uniform. That makes a difference.
Really?
They recognize the ranger uniforms for sure. Really? And you come around the corner, go, hey, and they jump and they'll run away and get out of camp.
They recognize the green jeans?
They recognize that. Yeah, they recognize it. So that sort of lowest level usually is just sort of like talking at them gently, walking towards them gently. And usually that'll work. Maybe some light, gentle clapping, just sort of get their attention and remind them like, nope, I want you to move. That is enough to move a lot of them.
So to summate, a lot of your job was to gently scold and clap at bears.
Yeah, it had to escalate a bit more sometimes.
Describe escalation.
So escalation with those bears, it depends. You kind of had to learn some of their personalities. The juveniles that have been emancipated from their mothers, so they're usually in the like 3 to 5 year old. Is that
an official documentation process, like emancipation of a minor?
Yeah, basically.
Okay, good.
They've been kicked out by their mom, and they're teenagers running around, messing with each other, playing constantly, chewing on everything, and pushing boundaries. Huh. They were some of the hardest to manage because they were
sure.
They were learning boundaries or like testing them.
When I was a teenager, I was very hard to manage.
Yeah, and it is the same with bears. Bears doing bear things. Yeah. So that they often required a little bit more force than just yelling or clapping loudly or sometimes throwing a rock at the ground. Or one thing that a lot of bears really didn't like is scuffing the gravel on the paths. The idea, I think, is that it simulates the bluff charge that bears do, where they'll kind of hop forward and smack the ground. And when a bear does it, it's spooky. Oh, I got charged a lot.
Really?
Oh yeah.
How many times over under?
Like
ballpark. And nobody's gonna be like, well, actually, Aidan, we reviewed the video footage.
No, I'd say a couple dozen.
Shut up.
Couple dozen hop charges. Never a full charge. Never
not one time.
No, never once was it like a full on sprint at me, stop 6 feet away or something. That never happened. But a lot of times.
You're talking about like a like a 6 foot, 8 foot, like kind of jump and then a stop.
Yeah. That happened a lot. There was one time there was a sow with cubs, a female with cubs who was walking along the beach, and there's the beach along Naknek Lake there, and then there's the Brooks River on the other side of camp. The bears really want to use camp as a way to go from the beach to the river, but it's in the way, and they know they're not supposed to be there, which is why we can be that forceful. And I was kind of following her along at each entrance from the beach up to camp and just kind of getting in her way. And I could see she was getting really frustrated that I was there. And at one of the last entrances, she did a big hop charge, and it was spooky.
Oh, I'm sure, dude.
I think.
How big are we talking about when we're talking about these brown bears?
So, I'm glad you mentioned brown bears because we said something earlier about brown versus grizzly bears.
Oh, I'm going to get into that in a second.
Oh, great. So these bears, there's a pretty big range, but the biggest were the males that are dominant on the river. I think since I was there, they were using some data from LiDAR scanning to get a better estimate of their mass. I want to say that the biggest ended up being around 1,400 pounds. And I would not be surprised. I am not surprised.
That's a big bear, but like there are even bigger bears in places like Kodiak, right?
There are some bigger bears there. Certainly the average bear.
You're talking about approaching a ton.
Yeah. These are gigantic bears. They are, I'm 6 feet tall, and some of the biggest with some of the biggest males, you don't push the males at all. You just get out of their way. Even if they're walking through the middle of camp, you only really do that harassment management stuff with the young ones, the juveniles, and the sows and sows with cubs.
Okay, ageism, sexism, gotcha.
Exactly. Well, it's mostly they are not used to anybody getting in their way. They will tolerate other bears being around. But
they're like, dude, don't try to influence what I'm doing.
No, especially if they're following a female.
Huh. Well, yeah, I mean.
Shoot,
my brother's like that.
So the reason you'll see those pictures of them on the falls is because of the massive amount of food available in the salmon run there. Those same exact bears would not tolerate being around each other that closely any other time of year.
Yeah. Which again brings us to the difference between brown bears and grizzly bears.
Yeah, definitely. So the grizzly bears are brown bears. Not all brown bears are grizzly bears. It's sort of a colloquial term, grizzly bear, but Ursus arctos horribilis is a grizzly bear. In Alaska, you can call an inland brown bear a grizzly bear. If you were in Denali, you could call that a grizzly bear. If you're on the coast, it's a coastal brown bear. It's a brown bear.
And the idea is that they have access to marine resources.
Yeah, so they have that. Exactly. That's right. That is the biggest distinction. That's how you make the distinction.
And what does that, as far as physical characteristics, how does that manifest?
In a lot of cases, is what allows them to get that big. It's what allows them to get that much bigger is because coastal resources means a lot more food. A lot more food available. Especially really calorie dense food. Exactly. Like during the highest peak of the salmon season, the bears don't eat the salmon meat. They will grab the salmon, eggs. They strip the skin, if it's a female, they'll eat the eggs and the head. Skin, eggs, head, that's it. They'll leave the rest of it. High grading. They're just getting the fattiest stuff. And there's actually during that peak time, they go into a state called hyperphagia. Yeah. Where the hormone that tells them they're full turns off, and they'll just eat and eat and eat.
Oh, really?
Eat and eat and eat and throw up and eat and eat and eat and eat all day as much as they can. And that's why they get to be 1,400 pounds. Now, and they're actually at some places, including on Kodiak, there are some of the more dominant bears that don't hibernate.
Really?
Because they have access to coastal resources year round. Because hibernation in bears is not driven by cold. It's driven by resource availability. Oh. So when they have access to an ongoing source of food, they'll just keep eating. But it's only the most dominant ones that can continue to get enough to make it through the winter without hibernating.
Huh.
So yeah, the biggest ones there, I a couple times I would just step out of the way as with those big males going by. I step into the woods, just kind of talk gently, remind it like, hey, I'm here. I'm not a threat. Go about your business.
Keep walking past me.
I mean, but still they're still only, maybe less than 5 meters away. And some of those really big guys were their hips were probably up to my face. And I'm about 6 feet tall. So enormous bears.
That was a large critter.
Yeah. Real big bears. The females are not that big. They would be considered a big bear in Yellowstone. I think a lot of them are more in the 400 to 700 range.
Really, that much of a disparity?
Sometimes, yeah. And you could definitely see that in being up close with them, that there was a really big difference. But some of the females can get really big too, especially the ones that don't have cubs in a given year. They're just not burning that candle. Yeah, exactly. They can get really big.
What is the craziest experience that you had in Katmai?
So I don't know why, if it was lucky or just the way that I worked there, I never ended up using my bear spray on any of the bears.
Really?
No. And so we were all trained with shotguns. I was thinking, I wonder if people might be wondering if we carried guns here, and no, we none of us carried guns.
That's actually a really good point. Describe like the setup of Katmai.
So Katmai is an enormous park to start out with, and Brooks Camp, which is where probably at least 99% of visitors go.
This is the epicenter.
Yes, exactly. Okay. And people fly into King Salmon. That's where headquarters is. It's on the Alaska Peninsula. Then you can either take a boat or a float plane to get to Brooks Camp. People early season are there to go fishing, there to go hiking. People in July are there to see the bears during the peak of the salmon run. Brooks Camp itself has a small campground. I can't remember how many people it fits, and then the lodge has maybe
when you say campground, are you talking about like tents?
Oh yeah, it's tents surrounded by one of those electric fences.
Sure.
And then you don't keep food in your tent, obviously.
No, there's a
lockup. Yeah, there's a locked up cache there at the campground, and bears they know those boundaries too.
Ballpark, like the amount of tents. Plus or minus 30.
We could look it up, but I think it's probably about 30 people at any given time.
Okay. 30 campsites or 30 people?
Probably, I bet.
Tents. Tell me tents.
Probably 20.
Okay.
This is guessing based on visual memory from 8 years ago.
That's okay. How about the lodge?
The lodge had more people because there are a couple small cabins where people could be on their own, and there are some of the more like bunk type cabins too. Yeah. And I think that probably had I think they could probably host another 30 to 40 people.
Okay. So we're talking about, between 60 and 100 people visiting at any given time.
In addition to the hundreds to thousands of day trippers who come in, they fly in, they start arriving, and then everybody's trying to get to the falls.
Gotcha.
So it's the Brooks Camp is where you go if you want to camp, if you want to do a backcountry trip. That's the starting point for most people. Or if you want to be there at the lodge for a while longer, you go to Brooks Camp. Most people. There are other fishing lodges too.
Yeah.
But the vast majority of visitors come in for day trips. And it's a very interesting dynamic because the bears know they're going to be there. The bears know where they're not supposed to be, and they're always pushing boundaries. That sounds kind of contradictory, as if they don't know those boundaries, but you can see it. And
they do. They're just trying to figure out like exactly how far they can go.
Right. And I think you can.
They're teenagers.
The youngest one, those ones are, yeah.
Well, I'm saying like they're like teenagers.
Yeah, sure. And then I think you also see the fact that they know those boundaries in the fact that I would not do any of those sorts of bear management actions to any bears out, like even a mile away from Brooks Camp. Even if it was the same bear.
Really?
I would not scuff my feet and clap and yell at and throw things at the same bear a mile away from Brooks Camp. And so we all were trained for the worst case scenario. We all had a shotgun certification. I don't think that's ever happened in Katmai.
Really?
Nope. Timothy Treadwell, years ago, he was killed in Katmai, but that was not like he was not like a normal visitor in a normal Brooks Camp situation or anything.
Yeah, we have a link to something over my shoulder right
Grizzly
now.
Man, that movie. Very, very different sort of situation. But as far as I know, there's been contact made between bears and people.
But nothing fatal.
No. And when I was there, so we nobody carries a gun. We all carry bear spray. Bear management technicians and the interpretive rangers too. The type who would do a ranger dog, they carry bear spray too. Everybody knows how to use it. All the visitors know, listen to the rangers. Excuse me. So I pulled the bear spray out of its holster 5 times the whole summer. And I took the safety off twice.
Huh.
One of those times was at one edge of camp, the edge farthest away from all the people, kind of by the maintenance shed, and past some of the employee housing. I was pushing a juvenile bear out of camp, trying to get him to move on, and he kind of darted into some brush, and I lost track of him. And I went where I thought he went down one of the paths, trying to push him out.
Yeah.
I didn't see him. So then I turned around and he was right behind me. So
what is right behind you?
So the closest he got was almost you to me distance.
Not very far.
No, not much closer than I'd like.
Yeah.
And it's a young bear, but still, I don't know, 200 or 300 pounds. Is a big guy.
Twice as big as I am.
Yeah, definitely bigger than me. And but at that point he was between me and camp, so I didn't want to haze him into camp. I didn't want to like yell or do anything to spook him towards people in camp.
Sure.
So I very slowly pulled my bear spray out and had it just kind of at my side, safety off, ready. And I was just talking at him. He's kind of doing the head tilt thing and looking at me, just curious. There was never a moment of aggression. He's trying to figure out what are we doing here? This feels different. What's going on? And I kind of sidled along, try to spiral around him, and I think he was probably maybe 8 feet away at that point, at the point where he was then closer to the beach than to camp, and my back was to camp.
And now you're like,
then I'm in a much stronger position, and then I did a little hop and and spooked him out. That was certainly a moment deeply ingrained in my memory. It didn't feel scary. It was just because, I mean, that was later in the summer. I'd had a lot of practice, but it was also just kind of like, nobody else right behind me is about to freak out and derail this.
I'm not going to push him into a weird area.
No, I'm not right next to a lot of people where, I want him to get away from me, but by doing so, I'm not going to.
I'm not going to redirect him into somewhere
Yeah,
bad.
I'm not going to make it bad for everybody else. It was a pretty straightforward sort of situation, despite what it sounds like. One little fun thing, in addition to the food resource that humans can represent, is the toy resource that humans can represent.
Oh, really?
Bears are very playful. They're very curious, very playful, and there's a bit of overlap between food and toy. Where
Boone has that issue too.
And I think a lot of it, obviously I've seen this in other animals too, where to bears it's kind of like, well, I don't know that it's not food. Maybe it is food.
Yeah.
And so chew on it.
I'll bite this toy pretty hard just one time to see if anything comes off that I like to eat.
Yeah, exactly. So that's part of like, don't leave any of your stuff more than arm's reach away, so that your backpack doesn't become a toy.
So what happened?
Well, I mean, for one time, that exploring the world, seeing if something's food, meant I saw a bear, cub, like first-year cub, bite an electric fence, and it was very cute. Did a little.
Sure.
And another time, somebody left a boat out with life jackets still in it.
Oh, is this the lady that was, bear, not my kayak, bear. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, no, I do know.
You've seen the video.
Yeah.
It's a black bear in Alaska. The link is in the description. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. No, it's kind of like that, except this boat was on the other side of the river, of the Brooks River from where I was down on the spit. And, but they were just these two juvenile bears just going to town on the PFDs and just tearing them apart, throwing them around, having a blast.
And dog toys.
Yeah. And there was nothing really I could do because I couldn't get around to them on the bridge at that point because there was another bear in the way.
Yes.
So I was just yelling, but the river's kind of loud. And and then I ended up just throwing rocks as hard as I could, trying to hit the boats that were closer to me to make a big noise.
Yeah.
Eventually it worked and they moved on. But they were just having a blast. And that's I'm sure that I would not be surprised at all if the next day or the next week, those same bears went back digging around in another boat.
And trying to find life is.
Yeah, trying to find something interesting.
You've done a lot of stuff that a lot of people would like to do.
Absolutely.
When did you know that you might want to get into biology? And tell me about, I guess, kind of your path to getting into the situations where you found yourself.
I think we can set that at several different sort of starting points, really, because there's way back to when I was 4 years old.
Let's start that one. Real quick.
Yeah, no, when I was 4 or 5, I had a collection of postcards. I don't remember. I think it was Defenders of Wildlife, promotional postcards that was bears, cougars, and wolves. And I think there were 3 of each. And I had them arranged in the order in which I like to look at them. And I had them in a little sleeve at my bedside table, and I could sit there and just look at them. Look at this one, look at this one for a while, flip it through, look at this one for a while. And I just loved looking at it and thinking about these animals and where they were, looking at clues as to what was going on in the world around them. Just in those pictures when I was really little, I remember, and I had to be back in that same order by the end of the viewing session. So I've always really been drawn to wildlife, especially, the large charismatic wildlife and carnivores and stuff. They're so cool. They're just, lots of people just find them fascinating. I remember a snow leopard at the Oregon Zoo when I was a little kid. It was a female that was in heat and she was yowling and you could hear it across the entire zoo and a bunch of the animals were freaking out. It kind of freaked me out because I think I was 3 or 4 years old again.
Sure.
But I loved it. It was still so cool. I could just sit there and watch the tiger at the Oregon Zoo too, all the time.
You're one of the very few people that I would believed remembered something from being 3 or 4. You just have you're an odd duck, dude.
I know it. I know. There are a few things. I could say 3 or 4, and who knows, maybe I was 6. I don't know. But there actually are a few things that I've verified that are that
you remember from being that little.
Specific memories from the house that we lived in Northwest Portland before we moved to the Southwest.
Well, give me another example of something that you felt was drawing you towards the study of wild animals.
I think a later step really through high school and college was just being outside. And I think that was through backpacking, hiking, and eventually trail running.
Yeah, you're a big trail runner.
It gets me out there. It's a lot of fun.
You've done some ultras.
I've done a few ultras, yeah.
Super cool.
It's a lot of fun. And
check this out. And if you like ultras, you should really check out our episode with Laz Lake, Barkley Marathon's The Most Brutal Trail Race. Available now wherever you stream podcasts. Okay, go ahead.
Absolutely. Great podcast. I loved listening to it.
Oh, thanks, man.
Really
Isn't
enjoyed
he an
it.
interesting guy?
He sounded so interesting. Yeah, fascinating dude. Anyway, yeah, so just being outside. So I worked at the outdoor program in college. I went to a very small school, Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington. About 1,500 students. So it was 500 fewer than my high school in Portland. But there was a really strong outdoor program, and that was part of what drew me there. And I ended up working at the rental shop. I led a couple trips and
what's the rental shop?
Trips. That's just the gear shop. And it was kind of a cool place to hang out for. Yeah. Probably not actually cool.
Just backpacks and things like that, tents.
Kayaks, skis.
Oh, cool. That was a cool place to hang out.
Yeah. Oh, it was super cool down in the basement
of
the student center. Yeah. Kind of. So I,
Kumo is much hairier than Boone.
Well, especially right now, he is producing a lot of fluff.
Yeah.
Sorry. So yeah, that was a great environment. I learned a lot because I had kind of, I grew up backpacking with my family, would go camping several times a summer. And starting when I was 9 and my little brother was 6. Yeah. When he was 6, we started going on family backpacking trips every year, through the Cascades mostly, in Oregon and Washington. Some of them were really absolutely heinous experiences that we loved. Just miserable, wet. I got burned, got stung, bit, all sorts of stuff, but we loved it. Went back every year. So then that didn't always necessarily teach me the skills of being in the outdoors, but working then in the outdoor program, going on some trips, leading trips, I picked a lot more skills, and it made it more accessible, opens a lot of doors for time spent outdoors. And the more time I spent outdoors, it was more and more, can I do something with this? Can I really work in this world? And then more and more finding myself drawn to the things that already live there. And I can remember even on just some of the backpacking trips I led, I wanted to tell all these kids, they were like 2 years younger than me, but I wanted to tell all of them about the wildlife that were there and that we might encounter, and that I'd scouted this route 2 weeks before and I saw a couple black bears that were right over here, and I wanted to tell them everything I could, and like how the marmots were doing that year, and what the vegetation was like for them, and why we might find different kinds of plants in different parts of the mountains. And that was also because I just kind of happened to take this natural history class my spring semester of my freshman year in college. That was all about not just sort of the way I'd experienced a lot of biology, which is kind of memorization focused. And I think a lot of people probably experience that in their science education too.
Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, dude.
Yeah, exactly. And that scales up, but like how you think about the world and how you think about biology and ecology, I think for a lot of people, just to get by, you just have to like memorize a list of facts.
And there's nothing behind them. It's just like, yeah, these are things that exist. I know that they exist, and I can repeat them in a specific order.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people probably have that experience. And I loved biology, so I got a little bit deeper, and I had a pretty good biology teacher in high school. But still, there's still something not quite there. But a natural history class was much more focused on the processes that drive what you observe in nature. And natural history now should be the foundation of how scientists look at the world, and how you start doing your science is sort of how well are your questions and your understanding of the world grounded in the natural history of the system and the species that you're looking at. Why, coming back to the really basic questions about why does the world look the way that it does? Why are these animals there and not there? Why are these plants over there and not there? And how does this interact with the geomorphology of the land? How does this interact with where the rivers are flowing, or what the winds have been like over the past 10,000 years? How
often is the answer, when it comes to Montana specifically, Highway 90?
Oh, way too often. I can only imagine. There's a lot of stuff with connectivity and movement stuff that continues to point at the great utility that wildlife crossings can provide.
Sure. Did you what did you go to Whitman to study specifically? Did you go undeclared? Did you go with like a general idea?
I went with a general idea of something environmental, because in addition to having a really good outdoor program, Whitman had, I think they still have, an environmental studies program. So it's not a major, but it's a combined major of environmental studies and biology. Or environmental studies and politics, or philosophy, or anything like that.
Sure.
You can combine environmental studies with lots of different stuff. So I knew that this was an established program. Lots of people had kind of worked in that way. And if you want to do something in that world and try to help move the world forward in some way within the world of environmental science, environmental studies, that's a good place to do it. I didn't know what I wanted to do. When I went to college, I didn't know that I wanted to do biology for sure. So I didn't take chemistry because it's a prereq.
Chemistry sucks shit, man.
Well, then I had to do by the time after I took that natural history course, I decided, no, I want to do biology. I want to do biology and environmental studies. then I realized, well, you have to take chemistry. So I took the advanced general chemistry, which was the 2 semesters compressed into one. And it kicked my butt. It was so hard. And that was the first class that I'd had to study for. I didn't really have to study much in high school. So I never learned good study techniques.
Neither did I, but it had nothing to do with me being a good student.
But that one was really one of the first classes where I really had to buckle down and figure out how to start studying and learning in a different sort of way than just kind of, well, this is interesting. Let me think about it more.
Are there paths to being a wildlife biologist outside of college?
I think having a grounding in some college will give you an enormous leg up, especially now. I can certainly imagine a time in decades past where there were more paths to become a wildlife biologist that did not involve at least a bachelor's. It's harder and harder to imagine, in part just because, if for no other reason, then that's how you get experience and connections. Because to become a professional career wildlife biologist, you have to have worked as a technician on other people's projects. You're not the one making decisions. You are doing the grunt work. You're basically
doing field work. It's like a biological intern.
Yeah. And sometimes it is an internship.
It's a literal intern. Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. Some of them, especially, I think there's a better awareness now about how that's kind of not great to not pay our workers. So more people are paying them better. But I certainly worked for not much money doing some tech jobs. But it's hard to find good connections to find those tech jobs and be recommended for them and interview well for them without going at least to your undergrad. I think I could see a way that an outstanding undergraduate student and an outstanding technician could work their way up through, especially at an agency, like a state agency or a federal agency, to a higher level of wildlife biologist by continued good performance over a long period, just on the merits of having made connections earlier and doing good work and getting lucky.
Sure.
But there is definitely a way to do it, but you would have to also probably be putting in the work on the side to learn statistics and programming.
Sure. And you do a lot of that in your job right now. I'm going to be frank with you and the listeners. This is not the most interesting thing that you have ever done.
It is fascinating, and it's not what got me into it. I went into college. I did like IB math studies in high school. I did not take calculus. I took Calc 1 in college, and I got by. And it was not natural to me. I've never done really well in math.
Will you tell the listeners also that is something that we have talked about at length privately and
Yes, we certainly have. We've talked about one of the things we've talked about is just the different ways of learning.
Sure.
And certainly that a lot of the quantitative skills that I've acquired and programming skills has been self-taught. I took a couple classes when I got to my master's in Colorado. But a lot of what I do now has been self-taught. Okay. And just kind of piecing together stuff from tutorials and YouTube videos. I love StatQuest on YouTube. It's great. And Stack Exchange or GIS Stack Exchange and all sorts of other message boards, and just getting that increased exposure. I think you can teach yourself a lot. It helps to have a framework built by someone else showing you where to put that knowledge. If you think, I kind of think about knowledge a lot of times and learning as like a bookshelf, where you have to somehow build the bookshelf before you have anywhere to put the books. If the books is just information and knowledge and ways of thinking, ways of doing things, you have to have a framework first. If I just throw a random fact at you, that's not going to stick as well as if I'd built you up over a long time and told you how it fits into a bigger picture.
Sure.
So I think something like a formal education can provide that. You can provide it for yourself a little bit, but the formal education can go a long ways towards at least setting you up for that framework. So I think that I am self-taught in a lot of ways for the quantitative skills in particular and programming for statistics and machine learning, but I probably wouldn't have been able to do that self-teaching without the good formal education leading into it.
If you had some advice for it could be a young person, could be a person looking to switch careers, who said, you know what, I want to work in the environments and with wild animals, where the environment's inhabited by and with wild animals. What advice would you give them?
I'd say to be flexible. If you can't, it depends on what your goal is. If you're
saying like getting into it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like you have to be flexible as to who's looking for help.
Okay.
Because you might have to start with volunteering still, unfortunately.
Okay.
You might, if this is something where you're looking to change careers or something and you have your own work to do, you might just have to there are a lot of volunteer organizations out there to do community-based science, and you can find ways in to help on projects that need help. And
that's a legitimate intro.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that can be, as long as you can then leverage that
to like scholarships or
just like making connections and finding other people who are interested, who might say, oh, you've been doing this for a while now. There's this other technician job I heard about, or you find yourself. Now you have X number of hours of experience in the field. You have some skills now. You could apply for this. So there are a lot of places where I know a lot of people love large carnivores because they're really charismatic. They're super cool. It's hard to find volunteer opportunities to work with large carnivores.
Because everybody wants to.
Right. Everybody wants to. And they're expensive to work with. Just the equipment that goes into working with them. And it's logistically challenging. So it's harder to really set up a good volunteer opportunity. If you're willing to work with songbirds and get some experience in the field, that will go a long ways. Or insects or whatever, herps, amphibians and reptiles. Yeah, that's great. If I am hiring somebody to be a technician, it's nice if they have some experience that's directly related to the species that they'd be working with. I'm much more interested in seeing that they are dedicated to doing good work and that they're reliable.
They can handle themselves in the field.
They can, and exactly. That they are going to make good decisions in the field, that they'll do well.
Kuma found somebody that doesn't work well in the field.
That they'll do well with new challenges in the field and be able to both ask good questions when they can and make good guesses when they can't. I think that, again, those are the kinds of skills you can get in lots of different field settings and lots of different projects. So I think being open to doing lots of different stuff is good.
Well, man, it has been such a great podcast. I really appreciate you coming on. And what do you think? Should we go get dinner?
Oh, sounds so good.
Okay.
It's an honor.
See you later, guys. Thanks for watching. And see you again next week.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching this episode of the Backcountry Manifesto podcast. If you want more Backcountry Manifesto, go ahead and check out one of these links right here. And make sure to share the podcast with your friends, comment, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. It really helps us out. Again, thank you very much for watching. Now go check out one of these things. I like this one. This one was a good episode, I promise.